Wicked. So I'm Scott Reed. I'm a solution architect at Niteco and an MVP. I'm here to talk to you about something I've talked about many times, and that's the Optimizely move to the .NET 5 and 6 platform that they released last year. So basically, the agenda is going to cover a little bit about what .NET 5 is. I'm gonna move that through very fast because most of us will probably know that quite a lot, and then talk a little bit about the changes for CMS 12 and Commerce 14, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about migration strategy and stuff you need to know. So basically, what is .NET 5? There we go. So obviously, we're all familiar with working with Optimizely, hopefully for quite a while. You know, .NET has the .NET framework, which has been running a long time. We had obviously lots of evolutions when it comes to the Optimizely or Episerver stack back in the day, from when it went to .NET 7 and moved over to the .NET framework. And this has evolved all the way through to .NET. Microsoft, obviously, when they wanted to target basically multi-platform and set up the ability to, you know, move everything away from having it all Microsoft and Windows based. Obviously had .NET Core that came about, and with the .NET 5 version that moves on from .NET Core, as you can see, basically we've had the release last year, which effectively targets that and moves that onto .NET 5, and now a multi-targeted .NET 6. So obviously there's with .NET 5 that came out at the end of last year, that was very good and great to have the platform there, but it doesn't have the long-term support. So .NET 5 is only going to be available until June, I believe. Can't see the notes, but June, I believe, and basically that then effectively would need to have .NET 6 for the long-term support, which is the 3 years period. So Optimizely have just released an update of a package which has the targeting for .NET 6.2 Core, which is really good. So we can start looking at moving that forward to having the .NET 6 support as well. And that is also available in the DXP for targeting, which is great. So obviously the benefits of this platform when it comes to using this, opposed to the older versions of .NET Framework, is obviously we can, you know, you can have people working on all sorts of different platforms, whether it be Microsoft or Macs, etc., on different versions of the IDE. You can target this, and you can target .NET 5 and Core basically across desktop and web and all sorts of different platforms, and it's very versatile. And a big one as well. There's a lot of performance metrics out there, but it's really performant when it comes to performance. So it's up to like 5 to 10 times faster when it comes to running the foundation demos on .NET 5, and then it's even faster with .NET 6. So, you know, performance is key, and we all know that obviously if there's a dropout in a commerce journey, you can have some problems. So what are the core changes here for CMS 12 and Commerce 14? Basically, so effectively we have a couple of areas that have changed when it comes to this. So easier to look this way, isn't it? So basically we have the admin area that has changed heavily. We've got changes when it comes to the package, the configuration, infrastructure, initialization, and then things like migrations. So effectively moving on to this. So what we have now is we have the .NET CLI support when it comes to project templates. So whereas like everyone might have been used to in the past using the Visual Studio extension, popping up your Visual Studio, going into there, spinning up a demo, and then having it there, what we now have is the CLI templates. Now, what's really great recently, just to add this in, is the templates which used to just have the bare bones, which was a bit limiting, have now just had the Alloy demos added in. So there's a full new branded version of the Alloy demos that is all better and nicer. So for all of us who are used to basically spinning up a demo within 5 minutes before a client call, because you know Alloy works, that is very useful because we're all very busy. It's got, I've gone on, sorry. It's got a change to the ASP.NET dependency injection, so that's all very good. You know, we've obviously moved over from structure map, but where this obviously has some problems is there's some configuration changes on here. There's some good blogs out on World, but there's some configuration changes around how to do things such as configuring things with options and stuff. So there's a few changes here. There's a www root folder, which is there to put all your website stuff in. There's a program CS initialization, which basically hooks into the startup file. That's slightly changed in .NET 6 because it's a lot more a minimal cycle. But basically, the point of all of this stuff when it comes to the startup will be to configuring your services. So where you can see here, we've got the add alloy, add MVC, add CMS. It's sort of the common convention to create extension methods that will hook this up. So you'll see things, for example, here like the setup tiny MCE, which we used to be used to using initialization modules and hooking that code in. But nowadays we would set up the tiny MCE configuration all based upon the startup, and it would just go in there. A big one there is obviously XML files, boo, all gone. So XML files are gone, and now we've got app.json files. And the app settings files are now environmental specific when it comes to the DXP, so it will just load the specific file that you need, rather than doing config transformations and have to worry about XDT transform configs in your transform configs. And bundle config. So at the moment we have a bundle config that sort of replaces some of the configuration for how the bundling and the assets work. That I imagine that's going to progress and move forward. I need to make sure this is quick on this because I'm spending a lot of time on these slides. So dashboards and reports are gone. So dashboards was the point when you first logged in. That's gone now. Reports are now gone. I'm working on a package to try and re-add them because the code's still there. But they're gone for now. There's a rewritten admin area, which is a big one. So the admin area used to be all web forms, and now it's been moved to front-end framework the same way as the main CMS works. Some GUI and page plugin attributes are gone, so you can't target that sort of stuff anymore. And there's the JS framework support for being able to create that stuff. There we go. So changes with commerce. Big one, we don't have Commerce Manager anymore. Massive, big thing. Everyone used to hate Commerce Manager. It's a great product, but it was very legacy, very much like using a web version of Outlook. And it wasn't the best of interfaces. Most of the features have all been now moved over to the main product, so you only have to deploy one web app, and it's all contained in there. But there are some missing features. The configuration is only via the API with some areas. So some areas such as currency and the business objects and that sort of stuff, they all have to be done in code. And also membership has been dropped, so you have to move to ASP.NET Core. There's some recent blogs that have been uploaded into World which talk about how to do that in a way that's an initialization module. So digital experience platform. So basically we now have Linux. What we found out recently is it's all via Docker containers. So basically as soon as you push a package up, which you have to use a deployment API now, that goes through Docker and containerization and then gets pushed across all the environments. Trust me, I know from very recent working with this that it can be a bit of an issue. So work with support heavily on that. And then we've got newer Azure provisioning for any existing clients. That has basically got a rollout at the moment, which is in early access, but I believe they're looking at September for rollouts of real clients. Obviously, config transforms are gone, so migrate all of that stuff into your JSON files. The deployment API, obviously, is now a required thing. So sometimes people used to push things up with, web deployments and web deploy, but your deployment API is a required thing. And a big one that caught me out when I first did this, but there's NuGet packages for commerce and CMS that you have to install and you have to set up on the startup file. Make sure you do them, otherwise you get many errors when you deploy and then you spend your weekend scratching your head. It can be tricky to diagnose those issues because it's difficult to get those errors out. But it is a better platform. So the roadmap, we've got .NET 6 going up on the horizon. We've got the documentation, it's getting better. We have a potential new platform for documentation on the go. We've got re-adding of some admin features that are missing at the moment. We've got a massive load of supporting packages that we are effectively getting more information on and more traction on. And then the rebranding is there and has already come out and is available. Cool, so upgrade assistant, and hold any questions till the end. So basically what we have when it comes to the migration process is obviously going to be a very taxing area for most people. If you're starting a new website, you've got Foundation, you've got Alloy, you've got lots of examples and references there. But one of the big problems will be tackling a migration. So the first point you've got here is the Upgrade Assistant. Now the Upgrade Assistant is a tool that Optimizely have built, which sits off the back of a Microsoft tool and basically allows you to hook into the Microsoft tool for migrating things from .NET to .NET 5 or 6, and then basically run their tool on top of it, and it will isolate a load of issues and things that need to be migrated. There's also a Getter extension, which adds a little bit more support, a little few extra things on that. But it's the first point of call when it comes to this. So what do we do when it comes to an upgrade or breaking changes within the CMS platform if we want to get all this goodness, this performance, this loveliness? Move those connection strings out. So the connection strings should be in the app.settings.json file. They will be obviously transformed and replaced from the DXP when you deploy to that. You want to move all your config and initialization. So there'll be a lot of initialization modules that everyone has, such as the tiny MCE one I talked about before. And that will go all the way back into the startup file and the configuration. There's still going to be some initialization modules in the framework that run, but most of it is startup. Rewrite any web forms code because it's not compatible. So you might have, for example, custom areas, custom properties, for example, in the CMS that might be web forms, and you need to make sure they're rewritten to be like front-end driven. That's the one that caused a few issues on one of our ones. The Optimizely forms is finally now not using ASCX or controls, user controls. It's CSHTML files. So the new package has all of that, but it was a common practice for a lot of people to extract these out and then rewrite them, make them better accessible, better for the accessibility point of view, etc. So quite a lot of people might get caught out by the fact they've done that, and then the package will change. So this will need to be re-extracted out and overwritten. The DI framework mostly should be like for like when you're doing simple things, but obviously, as I said, if there's any configuration-based stuff where you're doing anything like based upon targeting different services based upon a configuration, that's tricky, but there is a world blog that touches that from about 4 weeks ago, from what I saw. And then there's some slight changes on the routing system, but it's not too much. And then a big one, replace ASP.NET membership. So for anyone who was on ASP.NET membership, it needs to be moved to the ASP.NET core identity. If you want to preserve your passwords and logins, there's blogs around for doing that and migrating the hashing system. And then this has a star, because I reuse these slides. So back in the day, we weren't going to have Lucene support, but now there's a Lucene package coming out to support the standard search platform. But obviously, you use Find or search and navigation if you can. So commerce, this is a big one. There's a number of removed areas when it comes to commerce. So although we've obviously got the beauty of having most of the stuff back into the main product, and you've got a lot of good stuff in there, there are some areas such as the import-export, countries and regions, the countries, business objects, etc., which are all used to modifying, changing, and configuring. Now, a lot of those can't be configured in any sort of admin, so you have to do it in code. So I have linked to a blog of mine called the Run Once Migration Step. So there's like an iMigration step in the platform, which is part of the core commerce running, but it's an internal namespace. And then there's a different unrelated migration step class. And my one hooks into the migration step and allows you to do a run once code configuration. So my recommendation is to run that, use it, and put any configuration you need for the commerce platform in it, such as currencies, etc. And you can see examples of the currencies in the Alloy, in the Quicksilver demos, or I believe in the Foundation demos. So support. Now this is a big one. This is actually an updated slide from the last one I did this, which you can see because this is Opticon. So there's a number of third-party packages still yet to be updated, but all of the core ones, a lot of the important ones, such as the Getter ones, which you can filter in their GitHub by just searching for Optimizely because they've rebranded, are all there. There's a lot of good Getter ones. There's the Optimizely package link that is here, where you can go to the add-ons and you can see all the ones that have been updated. This is managed by an Excel spreadsheet, so that sometimes they can be dropped off, but for the most part, it's always accurate, so it's all good. But it's a good place to look and make sure your packages are there. And then there's some CMS 6 multi-targeting that are available there for .NET 5 and 6 for framework and core that has already been released. So you can start getting to go when it comes to that. And then the other one is David Knipe's NuGet Feed Explorer, which obviously is a brilliant one for being able to filter the stuff that supports .NET 5 and plug. So admin plugins. Admin plugin area is rewritten, so you can't do anything with web forms now. So you can create an iMenu provider, and you can create a controller and view. You can create your JavaScript and CSS using some standardized stuff, and then basically package that up. I haven't really done much packaging, so that's a very slight step, doesn't have a lot of information, but there's a lot of blogs on World that cover this. But you can use this for any clients you're migrating and just create an iMenu provider, and that's there. So big one here, DXP and infrastructure. Integration can only be deployed to via the deployment API now, and that's important. The JSON environments, files and the startup code are specific, so either use JSON files or code in the startup which checks the environment you're on for any configuration. But also be aware that moving to .NET 5.6 has new provisioning. So there's in the early access program, and that will give you a new area of the DXP PaaS portal that has like a migration section for migrating this stuff over. It's very cool. Then install the NuGet packages. So you've got Episerver Cloud Platform, CMS and Commerce if you're on the DXP. Make sure you register those in the startup because it's not in the documentation on World, so that's an important step. And then basically another one, we're used to rewrites being a web config. You can just do that in the startup file and use the rewrite middleware. So there's a load of resources. These are a little bit out of date now, but just go on World and look, and there's a lot of information on there. But there's a number of areas here on here that basically have a bit of the .NET breakdown, a bit of the World documentation, etc., etc. But there's a lot of useful links on here. And that is the end of my talk. Hopefully it's on about 15 minutes.
Well, any fundamental changes going from .NET 5 to 6, or?
Most of from the multi-targeting they've got with the packages, I think most of the guidance is that it's fairly simple to migrate because most of the changes of 6 are things like startup and initialization changes that still work both ways. It should mostly work like for like, but obviously there's some different paradigms of how you set that stuff up, so you might want to migrate that stuff over, but it should be pretty much like for like, I believe. I haven't done it yet, but you know that's what I've heard on the grapevine.
All right, well, thank you, Scott.
Cool, thank you very much.